Hey there, everybody. This is a new special episode of Empire Builders, and I'm your host, Tommy Yionoulis. This episode is going to be a little bit different because what we did today in today's episode is we are interviewing two people from the Potbelly organization. So we are interviewing Lynnette McKee. She is the head of sales for Potbelly franchise sales. And then we also interviewed Hampton Keil. And Hampton and his dad was actually the founder of Potbelly and who grew it from 0 locations to about 250. And now they have come back to the brand and they are a multi-unit franchisee in the Maryland, Northern Virginia area. So we are going to talk to Lynnette about the value prop of Potbelly as a potential franchise that you might want to invest in. And then we're going to talk to an actual franchisee, Hampton, to figure out what's his take on owning these restaurants and working with Potbelly. Welcome to the show, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Hey there, Empire Builders listeners. It's Tommy Yionoulis here. Welcome to the show. I'm super excited to welcome my guest today, Lynnette McKee. Lynnette, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Tommy. Thanks very much, and it's a real pleasure and honor to be with you.
Oh, well, thank you. Why don't we start off? Why don't you tell us what you do and who you work for?
Okay. I am Senior Vice President of Franchising for Potbelly Sandwich Works. We are a public company out of Chicago, Illinois. We're traded on the NASDAQ. And right now we operate a little over 440 shops and continue to grow really well. A lot of shops opening this year.
Oh, that's great. So let's go into sort of the history of Potbelly Subs, okay? Mm-hmm. And tell us where it was founded, what was the idea behind it, like what was its unique value prop, that kind of stuff.
Well, we actually have a very interesting story. So there was a gentleman in Chicago by the name of Peter Hastings back in 1977 that operated an antique shop called Potbelly. Oh. And he decided he wanted to make some extra money. So he went out to the grocery store. He purchased sandwich meat and bread and thought he would make sandwiches for his customers. Well, the first day he sold 0. But over 20 years, he operated that one shop, did very, very well. And a gentleman by the name of Kyle walked into the shop 20 years later and said, "Hey, I love this." I think he'd been a customer for many, many years. He said, "I want to buy the brand." He did. And over the next several years, he built about 250 locations, mostly in your larger cities. So literally New York City, Chicago, Denver, Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, just you can imagine Seattle, Portland. So you can sort of see the trail of the growth of what we did. But today we operate over 100 shops in Chicago, and those were predominantly because of Bryant's development. After that, it changed hands a couple of times, and then we went public. We actually, in November of 2023, we went back to New York, rang the bell, and celebrated 10 years on the NASDAQ exchange.
Oh, wow. So this guy had an antique shop and then he thought he would make sandwiches.
Yeah.
And so he had, did he have refrigeration? I mean, obviously he had refrigeration, but did he have like a walk-in and in the sink? Was it like,
oh no, I'm sure at that point it was a normal residential refrigerator.
Yeah.
Maybe a freezer. Sure. And it was just a very kind of a homemade type of situation. But that shop is still open today.
Really? Where is it?
Oh, gosh. You'd have to ask. I'd have to look up the address. But sure. I have been there, and it's a very cool shop. Had a big Potbelly stove in the middle of the facility. And that's one of our signature items today. Every new Potbelly shop, regardless of where it opens in the country, has an old, remodeled, or refurbished Potbelly.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not even know that. I have to go. There's one in Lone Tree. I'm going to go check it out and see if I see the pop. That's so funny. I didn't know that was like how it came about. So people would come in. So let me ask this question then. At some point in that, were people coming to the antique shop to buy subs only and leave? Or was it always just the people who were just browsing antiques?
There may have been some people, and I'm sure Brian Keil was one of those that over the years just started gravitating to that, because I'm sure that Peter Hastings over those 20 years improved his operating systems.
I would hope so.
Yeah, but I think Bryant saw the value of what was being offered. And of course, today, and I know you have interviewed Bryant, but he and his son came back in the fall of 23 and purchased an existing network of ours in the Baltimore, Maryland area. And now they're building shops themselves. So he came from an owner with a little bit of what you might call a quiet period, and then came back and said, I miss the brand. I love what they're doing. I want to be a part of it again. And he became a franchisee.
I know that is actually like probably the biggest testament to the brand and its strength. I mean, I'm a huge Potbelly fan, obviously. We were talking about it. Actually, I interviewed Hampton, Brian's son, yesterday, and for the second part of this episode. And I was telling how much I miss that Midway store. That like that Midway airport store was like my favorite. Like anytime I flew to Chicago, whether I was coming or going, I got a Potbelly because you couldn't get them everywhere,
Yeah.
So that is really cool.
I was in Midway a few months ago and ate in just one of the regular restaurants. And apparently the gentleman that seats everyone, we got into a conversation. I'm from Tennessee originally. Turned out he was from Tennessee. He had been there for many years. He was there when the Potbelly was across the corridor from him. He was very upset that Potbelly had been taken out. And so we hope that one day there will be an RFP, and there is an RFP for O'Hare now.
Nice.
That is going to be, I think the deadline for it is in June of this year. Sure. And we have several primes that are going to submit Potbelly. And of course, that's our home base. So we hope that they'll look at that as being the local shop and be excited to put a few of our shops in the O'Hare Airport.
That would be awesome. Yeah. So when back in the day, when Brian took it over, what were some of the biggest hurdles you guys faced in those early days?
Well, I guess Brian, and I've heard him speak, and he was actually on a panel of mine last year at the NRA show. We did an educational session, and I think he was, kind of flying by the seat of his pants a little bit, because this was something new for him. And, he had a great ability to kind of forward think and look at what he could do with the brand and figure out how to grow the brand. But, he has mentioned that when somebody called and wanted a catering order, he was like, we hadn't thought about that before. How do we package it? They began to franchise and had never franchised before and had to go through the entire system learning of what is a disclosure document and what can you and cannot say, and how do you vet franchisees before they come into a system to make sure you're bringing the right type of operators in to, bring value to the system, so to speak. So I think everywhere Brian turned, there was a learning curve for him. And he just had that personality of every time something new came up, it's like, okay, I guess I'll figure this out. And so, hats off to him, because to me, that is, we almost call him the founder, because he really took it from one shop to 250. And for someone to take that kind of initiative and grow the brand and really understand that you're going to hit a different corner everywhere you turn, that he could take it and just run with it. You don't find many founders to do that. Usually a founder will take a brand to 8, 9, 10 locations, and then they have to stop, and they've got to bring somebody in that knows how to take it to the next level. And Bryant did that on his own. That's
really cool. What percentage of Potbelly is franchised to corporate?
Of the over 440 shops right now, we have about 90 plus that are franchised. So back in the fall of 2022, the brand decided to launch their franchise initiative. Before that time, and I'll kind of give you just a little bit of history of kind of what led to that point. Back during the height of COVID, really in the summer of 2020, Bob Wright, who is now CEO, joined the organization and looked at it from a standpoint of, what value does the brand have, what needs to be fixed, what works well, and really wanted to wait to franchise until they were able to put some systems in place and technology in place and things like that. So there was a couple of years there that they worked through the brand. I was not there yet, but they developed what they called the 5 pillars. And those 5 pillars are really around good quality food, good people, systems, technology, and then the last one is franchise growth. And they knew they wanted to do that, but they wanted to give it the right timing to do it. And so they started that initiative in 2022. I actually ran into Bob. I knew him. I'd worked with him before at another brand many years ago. And we were at a conference, and he said, "Would you come in and take a look at the program we've created?" And so I did, and I gave him my recommendations, and he said, "Well, why don't you just come execute these recommendations?" And so I joined the organization in June of 2023. I will have to say, from a leadership team perspective, I had run my own consulting firm for several years. I had lived on an airplane for many years and just wanted to kind of get away from that kind of business model. And if it had not been for him and a couple of other people at the brand that I knew and had worked with before, I'd never gone back into corporate life, but they're the best of the best. And this senior team, I'd put them up against anybody in the industry.
Oh, that's really cool. So I think what's important for people who are listening to this to understand is that you're a majority corporate owned entity. Mm-hmm. And what I will tell you, having worked at Quiznos back in the day, is Quiznos had one shop that was like a non-airport shop that they owned. Yeah. Right. And it was in downtown Denver. We called it the Cube. It was this big glass cube right by, at one point, our corporate headquarters. And then they had a couple airport stores. Well, you can't count airport stores because their volumes are so high and they don't do full menu and all that stuff. Like they're kind of this little oddity in the world. Yeah. But you want to have, if you're looking to purchase a franchise, you want to have a company that owns and operates at least 20 stores.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you don't, then they make bonehead decisions because it doesn't affect them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a funny story. My buddy who owns who's a CEO of a sandwich chain out here, but he worked at Noodles for a long time. And at one point, Noodles made double-decker burners. So they had a burner in front and a burner in back. And these are like almost wok burners. They cook at like 400 or 500 degrees, and everyone was burning their arms trying to cook on the back burner. And they were literally like wrapping rags and tinfoil around their arms to deflect the heat down, And his point was, man, it's crazy how crazy it is that people who used to like run restaurants forget what it's like to actually like run a restaurant when they get to the corporate office. It's like all their experience flies out their heads.
Yeah.
When you have a brand like yours that owns the shops, when they make a decision, if they make a bonehead decision, it affects their sales too, and they quickly reverse it. So anybody who's evaluating brands, that would definitely be something I would look at.
Oh, yeah. Now, as we grow, we intend to become a much larger franchise organization. Yep. But we do plan to always have those corporate locations. You're right. Testing, training, all kinds of things. They're very important for a franchisee. And we want to look at it from a profitability. The key to the franchise system are the franchisees profitable. And if we aren't running profitable corporate locations, we don't know. How do you help the franchisee?
Exactly. And also you can test in your stores first before you roll out to the franchise system.
That's exactly.
So
remodels everything.
Yeah. So that way they're like, hey, look, we ran this in 50 of our own stores and it gave us this ROI and this is what we learned. That type of that type of rollout of a new initiative or a new POS or new training or anything, right? When you can say, we ran this for 8 months in our stores and this is what we saw and these were the keys to being successful and this is where we made mistakes, you get such better buy-in in the franchise part of the community, right? Because they're not just being told, hey, here's a new POS, you got to upgrade your POS and it's 10 grand and do it now. They're like, oh, this is the value we're seeing out of it. That type of.
We also do it with our marketing. If we're doing specialized offers or limited time offers, then we have a whole system of how we handle that before, or even new technology. We have a lot of new technology right now. We put it into our corporate shops. We tested it, made sure it was providing the services that we needed. And now we're rolling it out to the franchisees.
I'm thinking about this because like I own a software company and actually Potbelly uses our software, but I was just thinking about all the big brands that use my software. All of them have corporate stores that they operate themselves. And so they were looking for a tool to make those stores more profitable. And then they rolled it to the franchisees. Yeah. So, I think that's actually that was an epiphany that I literally just had while we were talking here.
Yeah.
Because the people who use our software, they care about profitability, right?
Yeah. Well, we just rolled out a new prototype too, and it's smaller. We wanted to test it because in today's world, there's a lot of catering, there's a lot of delivery. Yep. And not as much in-shop sit-down dining. Yep. And so we wanted to see, number one, could we take the cost out of the building? Could we take some of the square footage down? And we found that, that was going to work for us very well. And so now we are offering that to our franchisees. But we wanted to make sure that you don't want to put something out there and the franchisees are just sort of looking at you and going, what were you thinking? And I've seen a lot of brands over the years, and I've worked with different corporations that sometimes made some, like you said, bonehead decisions. And the franchisee said, hey, this is affecting us in a negative way. What were you thinking?
Yeah. My buddy that I went to grad school with was a chef and a sommelier, and he had worked at Wendy's in the supply chain for a while. And he had mentioned that, they had gotten a new cucumber slicer for their salads, right? And it increased the yield because it cut on an angle and it made the cucumbers look bigger. All these things. It was like $28. And they tried to roll it out to the whole system. And at that time, the franchisees voted against it. And it wasn't, and it's one of those things, they voted against it, not because it didn't make sense, better yields, less waste, all these things. They voted against it because they felt like they had been burned so many times by people making those bonehead decisions. They almost voted against it on principle. Like, we're not doing this. I don't care what you say, that type of a thing. And he was just sitting there shaking his head. But that's what happens in a franchise system, if it's not being managed well by corporate. And so once again, if you're looking at purchasing a franchise, I would suggest to you, don't just talk to the reference people, talk to just the people in your town and find out, like, what is that like relationship like between corporate and the franchisees? Because if they don't have a great relationship of trust, their incentives aren't aligned, then that's a very tough system to make money in sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we had what we called a system summit. It's basically our corporate and franchise convention, but we call it the summit. We had it in February of this year. And one of the things that we announced there, that almost 70% of our existing franchisee community have either signed new agreements or are in the process of signing new agreements to grow. In fact, there were probably 3 or 4 fairly new franchisees that had just signed last year. They came back and said, let's go ahead and add to our agreement. We were so impressed with what you offered and presented at the summit as far as your support and your systems, and we're already seeing it, that we'd like to make sure that we expand our network now while we have the opportunity before somebody else steps in here and gets some of this territory. And I don't know that there's many brands out there that can say that that's that large a percentage of existing franchisees are continuing to grow and grow quickly. And, we use them as a sounding board when new prospects are coming in, and we tell them, call our existing franchisees. They'll tell you, the goods, bads, and the uglies, but it's mostly going to be the really goods. And they do. That has, I tell you, that's our selling point.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. 70% is unheard of. Okay. So as the brand grew, what were some of those big milestones or turning points, like in the growth, if you know?
Yeah. So when Bryant finished his growth and the brand then transitioned over to different ownership and going public, there were, 2 or 3 different leaders during that time. There was, some growth opportunities to get us to, close to, well, we've opened several shops since I've been there, but, get us into the high 300s. But then it's all about leadership. There was a time that there was really a decline, and it was really when Bob came in. And, Bob's background is Wendy's and other large brands. He's been, a senior officer at these companies, just a super guy, very knowledgeable, good leader. He stops and says, okay, let's figure out what we want to be when we grow up, basically, and put a good plan together. Just a quick story. So back in 2011 and 2012, I had to think back at the years. I actually jumped ship out of franchising and I went to work for the National Restaurant Association. I had been on their board and went to the educational area and was executive director of their educational foundation. And when I ran into Bob, when I told you about it in November of 22, he said, I don't know if you're familiar with Potbelly. And I said, Bob, the interesting thing is there was a Potbelly. I commute to Chicago every week from Orlando. I said, there was a Potbelly in the first floor of our office building. And I ate there 3 times a week. I said, I think I know the menu better than you do. And of course, the menu back then. So that was several years ago. But I think when I was eating in the Potbelly is when it probably was in that slowing down stage a little bit.
Sure.
It still has that same uniqueness. It still has that same feel, but, the brand, the interesting part, it's 48 years old. It's kind of a new brand, but it has a great heritage, and it has, lived and survived and thrived through a lot of different changes, but it has maintained the integrity of who the brand is. And I think that's the most important part. So the what we call our legacy franchisees, those that have been around for quite a few years, those legacy franchisees are coming back and growing. They didn't grow for the longest time. And now they are coming back and seeing the changes in the brand and, the technology and the support of the senior management. And we're putting all the right systems in place. They are coming back and growing. A lot of times you'll see legacy franchisees decide to exit because they've just had enough.
Yeah.
They're not doing that. I have companies call me almost every day and say, well, we want to help you with your transfers. And I said, that would be great, except I'm not even working on any transfers right now.
That's actually huge. Like that number being low is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about what makes a Potbelly sandwich different than a Subway sandwich, different than Jimmy John, just all the different competition. Like what is the uniqueness of your selling proposition?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. It's not just the food, but we have a culture called the Potbelly Way. It was created some time ago for the in shops. It's called Sideways Service. And all of our team members are trained on this, and we interview our team members to see kind of those personality traits before they ever join the organization. It's interesting to see the tenure of general managers, district managers, and above that have been with the organization for 15 or 20 years. And when you ask them why they stayed, they said part of that is because of the culture. But it is called the Potbelly Way, and we've really kind of energized that over the last few years. And, you got your mission and your vision statement, but this is really around making the customer feel comfortable. And, the customer is right. You want to do whatever you can to make them feel comfortable that this is, every time they think of whether it's a lunch or a dinner, that, oh, let's go back to Potbelly. And it starts there. And then we have our sandwiches are hot. They're run through a 500-degree oven. They're a specialized sandwich. We have a great bread product that is, a part of the sandwich. And then we have some unique sandwiches that a lot of brands don't have. We just rolled out a steak sandwich that I haven't had it yet because I live in Orlando and I don't live near a Potbelly yet, even though we have contracts for 80 Potbellies in Florida. So soon we will have one near my house. Nice. But we have different products. We have milkshakes. People love our milkshakes. We have a banana pudding milkshake. We have specialty cookies. We have soups and salads and peanut butter sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And we also have an app that has what we call an underground menu. So there are products on the app that you typically would not pick up in a freestanding facility. Sure. But if you've been a customer for a long time and you have that app, then there's things on there that you can order that may not be on that menu board. So we have a tremendous customer loyalty following. It's amazing. It's almost like a cult to a certain degree. And, everywhere I travel and I go to conferences, a lot of different things, and people say, oh, I love Potbelly. And, I'm saying, oh, yeah, okay. And then they proceed to tell me something very specific about why they love Potbelly. And it's like, you know about the brand. And it was even like when I was talking to Bob, when I was eating there, weekly, when I worked in Chicago, I could tell him specifics about that restaurant that he knew I knew. Yeah. But it was just very common when we would walk out the door and we'd say, well, where are we going to go eat? Oh, let's go to Potbelly. We know we can get great food, but we know we can get in and out quick. A lot of times we would sit down there and eat because it was just nice to get out of the office for a little bit. But, and you never know about Chicago weather, so you don't want to be in the heat of the rain and snow. But there are so many unique things about it that in a way we don't fit in the sandwich category. We kind of look at ourselves as a fast casual or a sandwich restaurant versus just a deli or a shop.
Oh, that's interesting. What specific advantages would a franchisee get for joining Potbelly over, let's say, another brand?
The first thing I would say is the attention to detail with all of the systems. So we have a very large group that is developing. They have been with major brands for many, many years. They joined us several months ago, and they're going to build probably 50 plus locations over time. And they have told us on more than one occasion, and I had lunch with them not long ago, and they talked about it again, that starting even with the real estate site selection, the support and architectural and design and the real estate is not anything like they've ever seen with a brand before. We are in market with our franchisees. We're working with brokers. We have broker networks when people need them. We do the site evaluation reports for them. We do the designs and the architectural, and then we have project managers, and we have some really sharp people in our marketing department that help them set up their marketing plans for their grand opening, things like that. Operations are field operating people. I mean, it's a type of brand. If you pick up the phone and call somebody today, you're either going to reach them or they're going to send you a text back, or unless this, we're on an airplane or something to where we can't. They say we hear from the response time of this team is unreal. Emails, voicemails, any kind of response, and the services that we provide. And I've I've been around the industry for over 30 years and worked with a lot of large brands. I ran franchising for Dunkin' Brands for many years. I had my own company. I worked with large brands and startup. I would put our support systems up, and particularly getting franchisees open against anybody out there. And then once they're open, we have all kinds of communication tools and meetings and systems and summits and in-field visits that, sometimes the franchisee might have to say, okay, y'all need to go away. We're good. But we're there to help. We're not there to scrutinize. We're not there to say, oh, you're not doing this right or that right. It's like, what can we do to help you be more successful and be more profitable? And it is the attitude of the brand, I think, that sets us apart.
That's really cool. Let's see here. You kind of answered my next two questions, so I can move on. Let's move on to franchisees. What are you guys looking for in a successful franchisee partner?
Yeah. The first thing we look for is the cultural attitude, because we have worked so hard with the Potbelly Way that we want to make sure that people we bring into the system, franchisees, new team members, anybody, has that same philosophy. And that's very key for us. So we spend time just getting to know the candidates and really vetting them to make sure that it's a good fit. So that's number one. We look at it kind of from a three-legged stool. So we look at the financials, the operations, and then what we call the business of running the business. So we want the franchisee to have all three of those. Now, it could be a group of 1, 2, or 5 that bring the financials to the table. We don't care, as long as you're strong enough. And we have a kind of an escalating scale of what we want to look at, depending on the size of the deal that you do. The second is the operations. So there's sometimes on a small group, people may come to the table, they're good business savvy people, but they haven't been in food service. So if they are running, let's say it's a small territory, they're running 2 or 3 shops, then it may be a very qualified, good level employee that's there, because they're going to be in those shops anyway, and they're learning. And bringing in an equity partner sometimes for that size deal doesn't make sense. But then as groups get larger, if they don't bring really strong operations to the table, then we may ask them to have an operating partner. And then the third is the business of running the business, because we don't do single shop development other than in non-traditional. You can't require development agreements on the non-traditional side. But when we look at the business of running the business, is, do you know how to build a team? Do you know, how do you deal with commercial real estate? Have you been involved in marketing before? Have you dealt with the legal side? I mean, there's all these different things, the components. And particularly if you're going to be a 5, 10, 15, 20 shop operator, you got to understand how to run the business outside the shop walls. So, we look at, do you have development strength? If, our very large groups, they may be outsourcing it from somewhere, but they've got somebody on a development arm that they're not trying to do it all themselves. So sure. We look at every group individually. We look at their strengths. We look at where some gaps may be. And then we make those recommendations. And if they're willing to, accept those recommendations, then it's, pretty simple to move to the next step. I mean, there have been a couple of times where, people said, no, we don't want to do that. And so we sort of figured that was a part of the cultural piece. And we said, we love you. We enjoyed getting to know you, but you might be better off in a different brand.
Sure. That's cool. You can tell that the culture is strong when you're willing to walk away from deals. There's a lot of companies that will they will sell to anybody. They don't care,
Yep. Now we do deny some people, but we try to work with them in a way that we want them to feel comfortable that it was almost their decision.
Sure.
In doing that. And when I went to work for Dunkin', and John Luther was the CEO at the time, and I interviewed with him, and he said, and there were several people in the interview process, and I don't know who any of the others were, but he said, what makes you different? And I said, I'll say no. And so, he looked at me and he said, oh. And I said, well, not everybody is a good fit for every opportunity. And I think it's very important that you have to understand who you're saying yes to and why you're saying no. And I guess he liked what I said because he hired me. And then the general counsel, one day he said, you watch the front door, I'll watch the back door.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So if let's say I wanted to open up 3 Potbellies, what kind of like financial backing would I need? What kind of financial requirements would I have to meet, I guess?
Okay, so from your financial statement, we want a liquidity of $500,000 because you're signing a multi-unit deal, and we asked our franchisees to put about 30% down in their development. Now, it could be an inline and it could be some tenant improvements, so they may not need that much cash. But we feel like that it's for the health of them not to get so debt heavy.
Yep.
And so we asked for the $500,000, and then we start with a net worth of $1.5 million, and then we move up from there. We don't increase the liquidity because chances are you're not going to be developing more than 2 at a time to start with. And then we're going to make an assumption that at that point you have cash flow from your other shops that you have developed to then, give you more health to be able to do that. So, but I will tell you that to me, the net worth is very important because if you, and I'll give you an example. I had a gentleman one time who wanted to sign an agreement with us, and not here at this brand, but he had a current income of it was over $500,000 a year. And he had that position for several years, and his net worth, I don't think, was much more than $1 million. And my first question was, has he made any investments at all? Sure. Or has he been spending everything that he makes? And so to us, we want to know how you manage your finances, how you've managed investments, how you've done these things over the years. That's important. So we do look at that net worth. And then if somebody is also in another system, we may ask to look at their balance sheets. We want to know if they have other development obligations, because that's going to affect the numbers that they give us. And, back in the day, we had a situation at Dunkin' where we had a wonderful franchisee, and he came to us one day. He had about 10 locations, and he said, I'm going to sell my network because I have another brand that's suffering, and I want to make sure that I keep those employees because they have been with me for a long time, and I'm going to sink money into that. And so that was sort of an aha moment for us of, oh boy, let's make sure that if somebody has another operating business, that it's healthy, because Sure. If it's not, it's going to impact what they're doing with us. And, that begins to affect all of our franchisees in the system, because if a lot of people start selling, people want to know why, even if there's other reasons. If they shutter a couple, well, what happened? Well, it didn't have anything to do with the brand. It had to do with what was going on with them. Yeah. But, you don't know that. So to us, and when our general counsel told us to watch the front door, that's what he meant, because we have to protect the integrity of the brand and not hurt our stakeholders.
Absolutely. Can you talk quickly about the importance of multi-location ownership for, I would say, maybe versus risk, right? What I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. Well, back in the day, long time ago, I was head of franchising for Burger King. And we had 300 locations in Southern California and 188 franchisees. It was like herding cats. And we actually positioned a person in the market to consolidate, because there were a lot of operators that were single unit. They were struggling, and a lot of that had to do with they just didn't have enough income really from one location, a lot of them, to make it work. And so there's a lot of different reasons, and it stems from the experience. You can bring in a little more sophisticated business knowledge when you work with multi-unit operators, even if they haven't had food service. Those of ours that have come in, they have strong business. So they've already done this. They understand that piece of it. And also from a field support, you can work with that franchisee and kind of work from a network standpoint. And then those operators, when we moved to Duncan to some large area developers, they would mentor each other, and we would actually bring our franchisees in and set them up with like round tables and things, to where if they found some new system or something they would do, they would work with each other and educate each other on how to have best practices. So it's just, and two, so at Duncan, we had, when we moved to larger operators, I had one of them come to me one time, and because we also did some co-branding with Duncan or Baskin, and he said, I need you to talk to the training team. They had me scooping ice cream for 6 hours. I can learn what I need to learn in 30 minutes. And the reason the training team was doing that is because they had been training single unit operators that had no business experience. Sure. And so we actually sat back for just a moment at Duncan and said, okay, we are now developing with a lot of multi-unit operators. We've got to redo everything we're doing. From we shut down our website for franchising, and how do you speak to multi-unit operators? How do you train them? What are the issues they have after they're starting to develop that a single unit operator won't have? I mean, all those things you have to stop and think. And so when companies say, oh, sure, we'll grow with multi-unit, we'll grow with single, I just stop and think, okay, do you have two totally different systems? Because you have to treat these groups separately, not better or worse, but these single unit operators take a different training, a different hand holding than a lot of times than the multi-unit. So you've got to be really careful about that.
Absolutely. And I think other things just to think about too, if you're thinking about having a single unit versus multi-unit business, is that, I'm just trying to think of a brand, Circuit City, right? Whatever. Circuit City was the anchor of your shopping center. Yeah. It drove in, drove in thousands of cars every week. Yeah. Well, Circuit City goes out of business and you have a single unit operator. You're now tumbleweeds blowing through your parking lot. You're hoping to put a pickleball place in there or something. Yeah. You're just begging, So if you've got one business, your risk from outside factors goes up exponentially. Yeah. They rip up the road in front of your business, and now no one can make a left because the light's all screwed up. I mean, I had a guy back in 2008 who's like, yeah, I got road construction going on for the next 18 months. Mm-hmm. And you're like, and no one's coming into the shopping center because everyone's avoiding it right now. Right. Yep. Your sales, you can watch your sales go from $1 million, $1.1 million down to $300,000-$400,000. Exactly. Your rent doesn't go down because your landlord's feeling it across the board on all the properties there. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to give you any kind of rent relief, so it's like by having multiple locations, you mitigate the overall outside risk of things, right?
Yeah, we just call it, spreading the risk, but it's the risk mitigation. Yeah. And, there will be, franchisees that operate 10, 15, 20 locations. They may have one or two that just aren't quite popping like they should. Yeah. But it doesn't, the rest of their network is doing well. And so they can concentrate on those and see how to, fix them, whether it's, changing out some of the team members or whatever it might be. But when you're a single unit operator, it is really, really tough. And, and I know back in that Burger King day, you couldn't get 188 franchisees to agree on anything.
Oh, yeah. Now you go to those, what do they call them? Like those market meetings.
The co-op meetings and the market meetings. Yeah.
You got 188 franchisees. You got 188 crazy people yelling at you. And it's nuts.
That's exactly right. So, back in the day when we were there, we were looking at different ways to change the company just from a standpoint of you've got to bring value to all stakeholders.
Yeah.
That's our, if a franchisee isn't profitable, then you trickle that down and the stakeholders are going to be looking at you and say, what's next?
Absolutely. Last question for you is, and if you're not allowed to do this, I totally understand, but can you talk about the kind of like some of the store economics of what you guys are seeing and the profitability? And profitability is subjective because it's based on your rent, it's based on how good you operate your business, but you general averages. And if you're not allowed to, just tell me. Well,
the only thing that I can tell you, because this is in our franchise disclosure document, is our average is 1.3 million.
Okay.
But, like you said earlier in the show, we have some airport locations and some other non-traditional that sort of knock it out of the park, and we have to kind of move them out of the averages. But we have been increasing every year. And so, the story to us is one that we're a brand on the move and we're doing well. Our franchisees are growing. They're happy. They're speaking well when candidates call in. And, one of the beauty things, too, is we have as much white space as anybody across the country. We're in 30 states, but we still have so much room to grow that a lot of the other sandwich brands, kind of saturated a lot.
Yeah.
So that gives people, an opportunity. But I will say, and I'll kind of knock on wood this, wherever the wood is, this year particularly, and last year was a little bit tough, just because election year and a lot of things were going on. But we are beginning to get multiple parties of interest in the same markets. And I'll tell you, in franchise sales, there's nothing nicer than to tell people, we'd love to work with you, but you can't take 2 years to make a decision because we have a couple of other groups looking at the same market. So somebody's going to, as long as everybody meets our criteria,
we're selling. First person with a check.
We're selling. So, and even with existing franchisees, we'd say, we want to give you first shot, but we're not holding the territories for you. And we're finally beginning to see that in the ability to have those conversations, and that's when a brand really starts to take off. Yeah,
absolutely. Because now it's like, you can go through the whole process with Jersey Mike's too, but this isn't going to be available. It's going to go, and then you're going to be kicking yourself.
Yeah. So we're very excited about this year and the future to come. And we've got, just the best team. My team is awesome. And most everybody I had worked with before. So we sort of rebuilt the team when I got here, and veterans, they know what they're doing, and they're doing an excellent job.
Great. Well, I'll let you give like a little final pitch if you want. I mean, you've kind of already done it, but like if you wanted to say, hey, and also tell people where they can reach out and get a contact form in as well, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's one thing that we haven't mentioned is we have some incentive programs, and the one I want to mention is related to what we call large area developers. So you would have to purchase a development agreement for 15 or more shops, build it out over 8 years. But the beauty of this, we call it the 50-50 incentives. So if you meet or beat your opening date, we will reduce your franchise fee 50%. And so from 40 to 20, we took it a step further and said you can pay 10 down when you sign your development agreement and 10 when you sign your franchise agreement, and you'll still save the 20, but it helps with cash flow. The other is, for every week you open early, regardless of how long that, it could be 2 or 3 years, you get 3% royalty versus 6%. And when you look at it, it's a win-win for everybody. We've already signed a couple of groups. We just announced it a few weeks ago. We've already signed a couple of groups. We have a couple of more now that we're working with. But when they put a pencil to it and they said 15, if we exceed every opening, other than maybe the first year, by a year or 2 years, look how much money we're saving. But the way we look at it, we wouldn't have had those shops.
Yep.
So the incentives are based on the performance of the franchisee. So it is an absolute win-win for both parties. So I don't think there's anybody out there offering this kind of a program. And we have had some really high interest. And in fact, we had a franchisee that came back that had signed to build 6, and they're multi-unit operators. They're in other brands. They're experienced. And they said, we want to get up to 15. They've been in the system now for about 7 months. They've already got 3 sites ready to build.
Nice. That's wonderful.
So, those are the kind of things that I think help the brand to grow. But, and thanks to the, leadership team and the board and everybody that says, put those kind of programs together. Let's get this thing popping.
Yeah. Well, and that shows a commitment too, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, like you said, you built a win-win. There are people out there that won't touch those franchise fees. Yeah, I don't care what you're doing. You know what I mean? They will just, nope, that's sacrosanct, right? But when you're trying to spur growth and you're trying to get those markets to be healthy, because the other thing you have to remember too, to the people listening, I know you know this, but like when you're the only Potbelly in a city, you can't get the same your marketing bang for your buck isn't going to be there. Yeah. But when you've got 4 or 5 units around your town, and all of a sudden they're like geographically positioned, now the marketing dollars, the ROI on the marketing dollars goes so much further because you're just, everything starts to get better, right?
Yeah. And the speed of development, and we have the support team to be able to help them with that speed. If we didn't, then I think that would be a different situation, but we're capable of doing that. So it's just a win-win for everybody. And we've had some other groups. We've publicized it, but not to a great extent yet. But we've been able to identify several groups, and that's just going to spur our growth even faster.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We all win when you guys grow. Do they just go to potbelly.com and then click on the franchise button?
Click on the franchise button, or they can go to potbellyfranchising.com. So either way, it'll feed in to that. But, there's a thread at the top of the website. This is franchising, and they can click on. All they have to do is put their name and just some minimal information in, and then they can get connected to one of the directors. And my directors have all had over 25 years experience doing this, well-heeled, great people. They're not pushy salespeople. They're there to help people make decisions.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Lynnette, for coming on the show today. And I hope that everybody likes the new format of Empire Builders. This is our first episode where we interviewed somebody from corporate, and then we also interviewed a multi-location franchisee. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, Lynnette.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Take care. Hey there, everybody. It's Tommy. I'm back with another episode of Empire Builders. Welcome. Thank you guys for listening. Please welcome to the show, Hampton Keil. Hampton, how you doing, man? Nice to see you.
Great. How are you, Tommy?
I'm doing well, brother. Thank you for taking the time today. Where are you talking to us from today?
I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
Nice. I love Chicago. I'll be there for the restaurant show in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to Shaw's to eat a 5-pound crab. That's kind of
my favorite restaurant. Just went there over the weekend.
Oh, that's awesome. So we used to spend the night at a hotel and do 2 days at the show, and it was just brutal. Like one year I wore wingtips, and I could barely walk at the end of the day. So now what we decided is we've traded our hotel room for a 5-pound king crab at Shaw's. So we go in first thing in the morning, come out last flight at night, get that crab. It's the greatest thing ever. Good day.
I agree.
Okay, cool. So, welcome to the show. I just jump right into the questions here. So I'm going to hit with you with number 1. Tell us the name of the franchise that you own and your role within that business.
Yeah, so we own 13 Potbelly Sandwich Works locations currently. I'm the COO of our company, and we're going to grow to 35 units over the next several years.
Nice. And where are those units?
They're in Maryland and soon to be Northern Virginia.
Cool. I ran the PF Chang's at the Tyson's 2 Mall in like the early 2000s. That's a great area. You're going to do well there. Cool. So you're with Potbelly. What were you doing before you were with owning these businesses?
I kind of have a little bit of an interesting story. I, in college, was a journalism major. And one day I decided I was going to get a job at a bar, much to my parents' dismay. And I started at the bar, and within about a year, I was the assistant general manager. And it wasn't, your small bar. It was a big college bar that could hold about 1,000 people. And we had 5 bars going at once inside, and it was a pretty big operation. So I did that for a couple years. And when I graduated from University of Illinois, I applied to work for Let Us Entertain You. So I started as a service manager with them, and was then a restaurant operations manager and worked in a lot of their concepts. And it was just such an incredible experience. And now here we are, my dad and I, as Potbelly franchisees.
Nice. Now let me ask you this question. You're the COO, you live in Chicago. Do you have district managers in Maryland right now that are like overseeing the stores, or are you doing it remotely?
We do. So we have a regional manager and 2 district managers, and we have general managers in our locations as well.
Nice. So it's not like you don't have to be in Maryland every day. You've got people on the ground that are overseeing everything.
I don't have to be, but I'd like to be there as much as I can.
Sure. Do you have a house in Maryland, or you just stay in a hotel?
We don't have a house. No, we'll typically stay in hotels. I think it's just a little bit easier at this point in time. But especially when we're opening a new restaurant, that's when we're really out there a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's tag on that real quick. You're about to open 22 more restaurants over the next couple of years. What is an opening like when you're doing a Potbelly? How many weeks is that?
Are you talking from start of real estate development and everything, or just once you finish construction?
Open, we're kind of wrapping up construction, like hiring, training, all that stuff. Do you guys have a training manager, or are you doing that? Or
we'll do that. I'll work with the district managers and regional manager on that. But we typically start hiring a couple months before. We have the luxury of having other locations in the close vicinity to anything else that we're opening. So our most recent store that we opened was in Frederick, Maryland, and it opened really, really strong. If we hadn't trained everyone for weeks or months before, it would have been a lot harder. So, we made the decision. Our general manager came from one of our other locations as well. So, we definitely wanted to make sure that everyone was trained up because we knew it would be a strong open.
Opening is like, people don't put enough attention on opening restaurants, right? And if you have a bad open, that restaurant will flounder for years. You know what I mean? It'll just struggle. That's why, I think PF Chang's has been really successful with that operating partner model, and so is Chick-fil-A. And that operating partner model is such a great model around ensuring strong opens, because those restaurants, and your restaurants as well, like you said, you have a strong opening, you start off at full speed. You don't have time to figure it out for 3 months. You know what I mean? Because you piss off all the customers, and then they don't come back for a year, to give you that second shot. And that kills stores.
Exactly. I mean, we had a line out the door for the first probably 3 weeks that we were open, and we opened on December 18th. So if that tells you anything, just right around Christmas break, it was great. But it was a lot. I was bussing tables and wiping them down, and the second I'd finish wiping it, someone would sit right back down, and it was great.
To me, that's the greatest part of the restaurant industry. And I think you see it with Elon Musk with his businesses too, is that the CEO of McDonald's, if you walked into a McDonald's and there was a napkin on the floor, he would stop and pick it up. You know what I mean? Like, that's the one great thing about the culture of the restaurant business, in my opinion, is that if you came up as a restaurateur, then there's no job in the restaurant that's not important and that you wouldn't jump in to do to facilitate sales. And I do think that's a really neat part of our industry. And part of this podcast that we're doing today is really one of the things that I try to weave in is that there's a lot of people out there that are thinking like, hey, I want to start a business, right? And so part of what I try to weave into this show is that notion of, well, what is it like to run a restaurant, right? And I think that the fact that you are the COO, you're one of the owners, but yet you're bussing tables. Like, it's not like IBM, where like the IBM guy would never do anything that wasn't like the president, you know what I mean, is like below him, or an old, you know what I mean, like that prototypical like
nothing's below you.
Yeah, exactly.
I was cleaning bathrooms last week.
Exactly. That's awesome. That's really great. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question. And I kind of know the answer to this because I know your guys' history, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Of all the franchise opportunities that are out there, well, why did you choose this one? Why did you choose Potbelly?
So this is one that's really special for myself, my family, and especially my dad. He bought the original Potbelly in 1996, and he grew the company as CEO up to about 250 stores over the next 12 or 13 years or so. And then he got out of the company. You know, he was retired. He wasn't really sure if he was ever going to do anything again. And the CEO of Potbelly, Bob Wright, reached out and he was like, "Hey, how can we get you back involved somehow? What can we do?" And my dad's like, I don't think I want to. And as he got to know Bob and realized how incredible Bob and his team are, he decided, he's like, what if we were franchisees? Was Bob's suggestion. And my dad was like, that'll be fun. So he calls me one day, and I loved my job at Let Us Entertain You. I had no plans of leaving any time. And he's like, "What do you think about working together?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I kind of like what I'm doing." And he said, "Well, it's Potbelly." And I was like, "Okay, I'm in." I didn't really even ask what it was, but that was how we kind of decided that we were going to do this. And Potbelly is such an incredible brand with such a great history and such great food. And, the vibe inside is fantastic. So, there's really, there wasn't anything that I could say no to. And there wasn't anything that Brian, my dad, could say no to. So here we are today.
That's so cool. And let me ask you this. Do you like your job?
I do. I love my job. I love the people that I get to meet and interact with every day. And, I think that one of the coolest parts of my job is, I get to touch so many people in so many different ways. Whether it's, me kind of explaining to a 16-year-old who just started on their first day, why it's so important to care about the little details. Or it's me hearing stories from someone who's 65 years old and has worked at Potbelly for 25 years. It's just such a unique experience for me.
That's really cool. The restaurant industry is like, there seems to be like two groups of people that work in the restaurant industry. People who get in and then are doing everything they can to get out of the stores. And then the people that find, there's like a personality type that if you can find that personality type that loves the details, you know what I mean? Loves mentoring, loves training, loves not sitting at a desk, and they can work that business to the end of time. And that's such a great thing about restaurants as a whole, and what makes, the culture of our industry so cool. You know what I mean?
I agree.
And I mean, I started off at 14 in the Columbia Mall, making subs at the Jerry's Subs and Pizza, and it's like, I knew from day one, that's what I wanted to do. And that's what's so cool about our industry too, is that you can get in at 16 with no experience. We'll train you. You don't have to be an apprentice. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have experience to come and work in a restaurant, but you also have to love it too, right? To be able to stick with it for a long time.
We can teach you how to Potbelly.
Yeah, That's awesome. So I guess, well, you kind of already answered the next question because you knew the brand so well, you didn't have to do a ton of research on making your decision. What were your initial expectations of being a franchise owner? Because that's a lot different than working as a general manager at a corporate restaurant. So what were your initial expectations of that?
Oddly enough, I didn't really have many. I thought that it was definitely going to be different. Unfortunately, it is a little bit more desk time. As much as I love being out in the field, there's a lot more admin, and there's so many different things that I've had to learn about. Dealing with benefits and insurance for our employees. Going into the intense side of sales forecasting. I did that in the past, but now we're creating an entire budget with every single line on a P&L. There's so many little things that go from running a restaurant into owning a restaurant that you don't really think about. And in the past, if we had a truck that was running late, it's like, oh well, truck's running late. Now it's my problem that the truck's running late, and I have to deal with it.
Sure.
So there are definitely a lot of differences, but a lot of things are the same as well.
Well, yeah, the day-to-day part's the same, but and I think this actually, I think is kind of a weird thing within the franchise world and restaurant industry as well too, is, and you kind of just touched on it, is when it's your business, then if you're just managing and the truck's late, you're like, oh, well, we'll have to 86 a bunch of items. And you're not as tied to the actual sales number and the profit number when you work for somebody else, because you're getting a very small percentage of those profits as your bonus, right? Like if you're doing a really good job. But when it's your business and the truck's late and now I can't sell my number one sandwich because I don't have turkey or whatever it is, right? Or I'm missing some major item that's now 86. That's stressful because you're looking at every one of those dollars because hey man, like when COVID happened and things got weird, or like when there's road construction or something, and all of a sudden those sales numbers at that store are really struggling, you need every penny just to keep that thing afloat. You know what I mean? So it's such a different mentality.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. So when you guys first opened these stores, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in the early days of running these stores? And how many did you start off with?
So we purchased 12 stores from Potbelly, and anytime there's an acquisition, there's always going to be something that goes wrong. And it could be anything. It could be tech related. It could be, oh, the armored car stopped showing up and I have X amount of money in the safe. But our biggest thing, it was totally coincidental. Our first day that we took over, we had 2 stores broken into overnight, windows broken, and we had, and it was 95 degrees outside, and we had our HVAC system go down at 2 stores. So we're scrambling, and we're like, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's 95 degrees, and there's so many other businesses that probably had the same issue. But we were absolutely scrambling. We're like, well, there's glass everywhere. Everyone's like, what do we do? What do we do? And this is before we had completely finalized our maintenance program as well. So
Sure.
we're calling people left and right. We ended up getting the windows and everything fixed before the store was supposed to open, which that was a pretty impressive feat, I think.
That's amazing.
But the HVAC, was a little tough.
Oh man. And in Maryland in the summertime, holy heck.
It's hot.
95% humidity.
Yep. It's hot. Yep.
Wow. That's crazy. What are the odds? Did you sit there that morning and go, holy crap, what did we get ourselves into?
Pretty much. But, after that, we got everything figured out, and, it was pretty smooth sailing. We were lucky to inherit a great team from Potbelly, and, our regional manager and district managers have 20 years, 21 years, and 11 years of Potbelly tenure. So,
wow.
It's great. And, getting to work with them is such a privilege too.
Absolutely. What advice would you give to a first-time franchisee that's just starting out with their first store or their first, agreement?
I think that, you definitely know this. It's have a checklist. Have a list of things that you need to get done. and dates that you need to get them done by. I think that was like for me, I think my biggest mistake in this was not having a maintenance program on day one. We had one on probably day 4, but we hadn't fully agreed to terms, and that we were kind of at a standstill. We were kind of hoping that we'd be able to wait it out and they'd agree. And we kind of got ourselves into a sticky situation where we just kind of had to sign it and get it up and going. And setting a deadline for everything, I think, is really important.
That's great advice. Tell me more about this maintenance program. So when you say a maintenance program, you mean like one company that's managing all the maintenance and all the vendors for the stores, or is it just going out and finding individual contractors, if you will?
So we have a company that does pretty much everything for us. So we'll send an email to them if we need a plumber, if we need HVAC help, if we have a refrigerator that goes down, and they handle all that for us.
Oh, that's cool. So one point of contact, one person to hold responsible. And then my assumption would be that they work with preferred vendors. And so if someone botches a job, you can complain to them. And then they're like, hey, man, you're going to lose my business if you don't get this thing fixed. Is that kind of
exactly
that way?
Exactly. And it's a little bit more expensive, but not much. And to me, it's completely worth it. They manage all the preventative maintenance, and they keep everything really, really well organized for us, which I really appreciate.
I was a consultant in my last company. We did software consulting, and and people would always complain because consultants make $150, $200 an hour, right? And they're like, well, you can do this ourselves. And what we would tell people, and I think it's really true, is that you're paying the same price either way, because what you're not factoring in is time and headache for doing it yourself, right? So yeah, you might pay 10% more because you have this maintenance company, but then you have to factor in this, like the lost time and productivity on things that actually matter when you're comparing those two numbers. You know what I mean? And so exactly. I'm with you. Like, you need to run the restaurant. You need to make sure you're delivering great food and a clean environment and a clean restaurant with great customer satisfaction. That's your core business. Making sure that somebody comes and checks the walk-in once every 6 months is not your core business. And so you can make up those management fees that those guys are charging on top of whatever you're paying the contractors, from just focusing on developing your people, right? Getting that next store open. So I think it sounds amazing. Yeah. I didn't even realize those companies existed. I guess I should have, but I've never been in that position.
Yeah, there are tons of them. And, like you said, you don't need a general manager stressing out about not having AC. You need them lifting people up in the store and saying, we've got fans, we're going to make these sandwiches, and it's going to be fixed in a few hours.
Yep, exactly. And that's exactly it. Lifting people up, servant leadership, right? Like, how do I keep you here for 20 years, right? How do I get you a career in this business? Because like you said, you're going to add, 23 more restaurants or 22 more restaurants. So you need to be developing those people internally. Like you said, the GM came over, so they knew what a rush was on day one. They could get everybody through it. They could pitch in on the make table or whatever. So that's cool.
At the end of the day, the most important part of the restaurant industry is the people who are working in it. And, if you don't have great people, you're not going to be able to have a great restaurant.
And I think the GM, there's a lot of brands. I have a lot of brands, and the GM, you can track the sales and customer satisfaction and retention when GMs move. You know what I mean? Like the GM role in a restaurant, like back in the day, like in the 80s when I started, because I'm old man, and and in the 90s, like you just didn't become a GM. But there's a lot of brands right now that are really struggling, and they'll take the guy that's been there 3 months and make him the GM, right? And that's what's the death knell of your restaurant, is when you don't have great managers at top. And I think too, the importance of having district managers who can be in the store to support those GMs. Like, it sounds like, because you only have 13 restaurants right now, but you have 3 above store leaders. That's a big expense, right? So you guys have committed to service, and and I think that shows it, right? Would you agree?
Yep, it's so important, and plus with the amount that we're going to grow,
Yeah.
it's good to have these people in these positions because they're going to grow with us.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Okay. So what are some of the current challenges you guys are facing right now?
The hardest thing right now is finding great real estate. In our market, it's a really expensive market, real occupancy wise, and it's so hard to find great real estate because it's everything's leased. In Virginia, it's nice; they're starting to build things again,
Sure.
so we have this incredible pipeline. But it's hard to find sites to open stores this year, and we have a great pipeline for 26 and 27 and 28, but it's hard to find things that are great and be able to get into them within a year.
Now, Potbelly seems to have a pretty big footprint. How many square foot? What's the average square foot on your stores?
So I'll kind of go into a little bit of detail on this. So right now, our average footprint's about 22 to 2,300 square feet, but Potbelly has a new prototype design that's 1,800 square feet. So right now our business is about 40% digital, and we don't have as many customers coming in. If you remember Potbelly back in the day, there was live music and people would sit there for hours. That doesn't happen anymore.
Sure.
So, we don't need 23. We have one store that's over 3,000 square feet. It's crazy. And, we just don't need that anymore.
Yeah. Now, with this new prototype, do you have a second line? A back line?
Yeah, we have a front line and a back line. Back of house is just a little bit smaller. They were able to make it more efficient. We were wasting a lot of space on walk-ins as well before this new prototype. So they did a great job coming up with everything and making the space really significantly more efficient.
Sure. So let's keep going on that for a second. So for those of you guys who don't understand square footage in a restaurant, you want the smallest restaurant you can humanly have that still accommodates your guests, because that's a fixed cost that you cannot escape from. And when times are tight, if you have too big of a restaurant, that's what's going to end up sucking up all your cash and putting you out of business. So that 500 square foot, 400, 500 square foot, what is that going to result in a monthly rent savings roughly, do you think?
Well, it depends. I mean, a lot of our leases are $50, $55 a square foot.
Yeah. So, I mean, $2,500 a month, right? Something like that,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe more. So
it's a lot of sandwiches.
Yeah. 25. Yeah. How many sandwiches is that? 250, 300, 400 sandwiches, something like that?
I can't tell you exactly, but it's a lot of sandwiches. And, we're lucky that the Potbelly team has done such a great job of being able to make the space so much more efficient. And, and it's beautiful too. I don't know if you've seen any of the new designs, but they're really, really nice.
That's cool. So then let's talk about that too. You've had nothing but great things to say about Potbelly, right? And obviously, your dad hasn't been owning the company for almost 20 years now. Now you're a franchisee. Talk to me about the support you're getting from Potbelly as a franchisee. I worked at Quiznos, so everybody knows the franchisees hated Quiznos corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that relationship. Tell us what they're doing for you. Explain the value that they're bringing to the table.
Yeah, I think we have a great relationship with Potbelly corporate. We have a franchise business consultant, and his job is kind of to be the liaison between us and Potbelly corporate. And we have a great relationship with him, and I think that anytime we ever need anything from corporate, we always get it. And they do have a great support system with construction and design and real estate. So I think that they've done a good job, and it helps having an experienced senior leadership team. Bob Wright, who's the CEO, he was the COO of Wendy's, and overseeing thousands of locations. So he knows how to build a franchise brand.
That's cool. What kind of things do you need from corporate occasionally?
Things like a lot of IT support. I think we need. Sometimes they can go into more detail with reporting than we can.
Sure.
Because it's their POS system. Sometimes connections are great. Supply chain issues they help out with a lot. So they definitely help us anytime they can.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, what's my next question here? Yep, there you go. Okay, so you've already answered this question, but I'll ask it again. Overall, are you happy with your decision to become a franchisee?
Yeah. My life's a lot different, but I do like it.
Find that there's more stresses. Like, did you find that when you worked for Let Us Entertain You, you weren't thinking about Let Us Entertain You at 2 a.m, and now with your own business that you are thinking about it if you're up or something bad's happening?
Oh no, I definitely was thinking about lettuce at 2 a.m. Because I would get to work at 5:30 in the morning. So
Yeah.
but no, I think it's definitely a different type of stress. At lettuce, a lot of the stress was during the shift. And making sure everything went smoothly. I was in a building with 3 concepts, 2 of them coming out of one kitchen, and running a shift in that environment is not easy, but I loved it. Now I think that it's a different type of stress though, because now it's all about the bottom line.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So Jim, so we're now to the war story time. So the war story is my favorite part of the interview. Doesn't have to be a Potbelly war story. It can be any war story you've ever had in any restaurant or job you ever worked. But I want to know one of those crazy things that you can't believe happened, can't believe you got through. Just like the example I always give is I had a guy who was running a hotel in the Seychelles Islands, and Somali pirates hijacked his supply ship. Like those kinds of insane stories. If you got one for me, I would love to hear it.
Well, my Potbelly war story probably would have been the one that I told about day one.
Yeah.
But let's see, let's go back to the college days. Mom's weekend and dad's weekend were typically some really, really big weekends for us.
Sure.
And I don't know how it happened, but we had 2 out of our 3 ice machines go down in one day.
Whoa.
So that turned into me going to every single gas station in Champaign, Illinois, and buying every single bag of ice I could get. And I'd just be going back and forth all day long, getting ice. That was definitely a fun one. And then another good one, probably from the college days. I don't know how or what got into these people, but they decided they were just going to destroy the bathroom. So I walked into the bathroom, there's about an inch of water, and there's a toilet ripped out of the ground. The sink is where the toilet should have been, and nothing's where it should have been. So dealing with that during a shift is not fun either.
Oh my gosh. I got into them, alcohol.
Yeah, it's just a little bit.
Oh man, that's nuts. Well, okay. So do you want to just plug your website? So if there's anybody in the Washington, Baltimore, Northern Virginia area that's looking for a job, here's this interview, or would like to talk to you maybe about, hey, well, maybe they want to ask you some questions. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. I'll give you a link and send that over to you. And anyone who wants to reach out, happy to. And I'll share my contact info as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hampton, for being on the show today. Thank you guys to all the Empire Builders listeners. We really appreciate you guys continuing to follow the show. And we'll see you guys soon with another episode. Take care, everybody. Take care, Hampton. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.
You're welcome.